The state of South Carolina executed its second inmate this year. Richard Moore, a man convicted in the death of an upstate store clerk, was put to death. The execution came after pushback from some groups who sought to have his life spared. Fox Carolina's Brooklyn Cromer was a media witness to that execution in Columbia and explains what happened.
The state has just carried out the execution of Richard Moore. He's been on death row here in South Carolina for the last 2 decades, and today I was one of the media witnesses who actually went inside and watched this execution take place. Now, to give you an idea of how this all played out, the execution was set for 6 p.m. tonight. We were escorted inside the witness room at 5:59. When we walked in, the curtains were already open. We could see Richard Moore lying on a gurney. He was covered up with a sheet up to his chest. He was looking up at the ceiling. He had glasses on, and his left arm was stretched out. It was strapped down to a gurney. You could see where the IV had already been placed into his arm. And just about a minute later, the warden announced that the drug could be administered, the lethal injection drug. So this all played out really quickly. We didn't get to hear the last statement being read. We are told it was read by his attorney, but we were brought into the room after this all took place. So we didn't get to see something that you do typically get to see during an execution. The Department of Corrections says it was a mistake on their part, so that's why we did not observe that part. Everything happened really quickly. After this drug was administered at 6:01, I observed probably 2 minutes later 3 or 4 really deep breaths. I did notice maybe a couple shallow breaths a minute or so later, but no movement, no sounds. You could really hear a pin drop inside that room. Seated in front of me, 2 witnesses from the victim's family, Solicitor Barry Barnett from Spartanburg County, where this crime happened, was there as well. And then seated beside him to his right was Moore's spiritual advisor and his attorney. Now, one of the things that just really stood out to me, it made it so much more emotional because in this quiet room, you can only hear his attorney crying. At one point, Moore's spiritual advisor reached over and held her hand, and he held it throughout most of the time until the time of death was announced. The doctor came out and with a stethoscope on, he checked Richard Moore to see if he had a heartbeat. He checked it for 30 or 45 seconds, different places, and walked back into another room. And at that point, at 6:24, the warden announced his time of death, and they very quickly closed the curtains, and we were escorted out. So a very quick process, but a lot of just sitting there observing the emotions, especially of Moore's attorney, who was very visibly upset about this. I know, has fought for years to try to get his death sentence converted to a life sentence. And tonight she has released a statement that says, in part, this execution underscores the flaws of South Carolina's death penalty system. Who is executed versus who is allowed to live out their lives in prison appears to be based on no more than chance, race, or status. Now, this is the second execution to be carried out here in the state in the last month, and 4 additional executions are scheduled for later this year and into early next year. Reporting in Columbia, Brooklyn Cromer, Fox Carolina News.